In this lecture, we are going to discuss the inference rules which can be used to check the validity of the arguments. To check the validity of an argument, we may use the symbols and the laws of logic. That is, we can use the symbols and the laws of logic to check the validity of an argument. So for this, we have to follow the following steps. First one is rewrite the hypothesis symbolically. We know the argument is actually uh, contains some hypothesis and a conclusion. So first rewrite the hypothesis symbolically. Second step is assume the hypotheses are true. All these hypotheses are true. Third step is if the inference rules in this table. This is the table for the inference rules. So if these inference rules or the laws of logic can be used to reach the given conclusion, then the given argument is valid. That is, if we can use these inference rules or the laws of logic to this hypothesis to obtain a conclusion, then we can say that the argument is valid. Otherwise, it is invalid. Now, what is inference rules? There are 7 inference rules. First one is conjunction. Second one is simplification. Third is addition. Fourth is law of detachment. Fifth is law of contrapositive. Sixth one is disjunctive syllogism. And last one is hypothetical syllogism. Now, what are these inference rules? Conjunction rule is P conjunction Q implies P conjunction Q. That means the conjunction rule says that if both P and Q are true, then P conjunction Q is also true. That is the conjunction rule. Second is simplification rule. Simplification rule says that P conjunction Q is true. If P conjunction Q is true, then P is true. It is actually we know that directly that if P and Q are true, then we know it is simply we know it implies P is true. So that is the simplification. P conjunction Q is true, then P is true. Now addition rule is says that if P is true, then P disjunction Q is true regardless of truth value of Q. Q true ആയാലും false ആയി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ പോലും എന്താണ് P true ആണെങ്കിൽ P or Q or P disjunction Q എന്തായിരിക്കും true ആയിരിക്കും. അതാണ് addition rule പറയുന്നത്. That is P is true implies that is if P is true then P disjunction Q is true regardless of the truth value of Q. Right. Next one is law of detachment. Law of detachment says that if P is true and P implies Q is true, implication is also true. If P is true and P implies Q is true, then Q is also true. That is, if P implication Q is true and this P is also true, then we will get Q is also true. Let's always conclude that Q is also true. And fifth one is law of the contrapositive. It is actually says that if P implies Q is true and negation Q is true means Q is false. P implies Q is true and negation Q is also true. That means Q is false. Then we can say that P is also false. P must be false. That is P implies Q is true and Q is false, then P must be false. That is the law of contrapositive. Now disjunctive syllogism is this: P disjunction Q and negation P implies Q. This is nothing but if P disjunction Q is true and P is false. Clearly distinction P or Q is true and P is false. That is negation P is true means P is false. P or Q is true and P is false. Then we know it will be true. So Q must be true. That is the disjunctive syllogism. P or Q or P disjunction Q is true and negation P is true or P is false, then Q must be true. That is disjunctive syllogism. Last one is hypothetical syllogism. It is we know junction Q implies R implies P implies R. അതായത് P implies Q true ആണ് അതോടൊപ്പം Q implies R ഉം true ആണെങ്കിൽ we can say that P implies R. ട്രാൻസിറ്റിവിറ്റി പോലെയാണത് ഹൈപ്പോത്തറ്റിക്കൽ സിലോജിസം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. P implies Q true ആണ് and Q implies R is also true, then P implies R must be true. That is hypothetical syllogism. So these are the inference rules. Okay, so by using this inference rule or the laws of logic, we can check the validity of the argument. Okay, for that we need to follow these steps. That is, we have to rewrite the hypothesis symbolically first, then we have to assume all these hypotheses are true. Now after applying inference rule or the laws of logic, if we reach to the conclusion C, then we can see that argument is valid, otherwise it is invalid. Next is each of these inference rules can be written in inferential form. What is inferential form? Inferential form is actually this: H1, H2, these are the hypotheses, etc., Hn, and the conclusion. This form is called the inferential rule of arguments. So each of these inference rule can be written as written in the form inferential rule. For example, we have the conjunction rule is this: P conjunction Q implies P conjunction Q. That is, if P and Q are true, then P conjunction Q is also true. So we can express this in inferential form as this is P is the first hypothesis, then second hypothesis Q. If P and Q are true, we have to assume that all these hypotheses are true. Then therefore the conclusion is P uh, conjunction Q. So this is the inferential form of conjunction rule. Clear? If P, this implies these are the first hypothesis P, second hypothesis Q. If P and Q are true, then P conjunction Q is true. Then that is the conjunction rule. So we can express the conjunction rule in inferential form like this. In a similar way, we can express the second one. Second one is simplification rule. Simplification rule is this: P conjunction Q implies P. That means if P conjunction Q is true, then P is also true. So simply we can write this in inferential form as P conjunction Q, therefore P. That means if this P conjunction Q is true, then P is true. Okay, so here is only one hypothesis, that is P conjunction Q. Now what about addition rule? Addition rule is nothing but P implies P or Q. So in conjunction rule we can write this as, this is actually if P is true, then P conjunction disjunction, right? P disjunction Q is also true. So in inferential form we can write this as P is the hypothesis, only hypothesis, uh, therefore P disjunction Q. So if P is true, then P or Q or P disjunction Q is also true. That is the addition rule. Now law of detachment. Law of detachment is P conjunction P implies Q implies Q. That means we can express this in inferential form as here we have first hypothesis P, second hypothesis P implies Q. So second hypothesis, P implies Q. And the conclusion is if P and P implies Q are true, if these two hypotheses are true, then conclusion is Q is true, that is Q. So this will be the inferential form of law of detachment. Now next is fifth one, law of contrapositive. We can express this. So you just pause this video and you try to write the inferential form of the following, the next laws or next rules, inferential rules. So we can express this in inferential rule as, here actually it is says that P implies Q is true and Q is not true. That is, P implies Q is true and Q is false, then P is also false. So we can write this as P implies Q is first hypothesis. Then second hypothesis, negation Q. That is, so P implies Q is true and negation Q is true. That is, Q is false. Therefore, we have the conclusion is negation P. That is, negation P is true. That means P is false. P must be false. So this will be the inferential form of the law of contrapositive. Now, sixth one is disjunctive syllogism. So we can, this is actually P or Q is true, or P disjunction Q is true and P is false, then Q is true. So this can be written in inferential form as P disjunction Q. It can be taken as first hypothesis, and the second hypothesis is negation P. Then if these two hypotheses are assumed to be true, then Q must be true. Therefore, Q. So this is the inferential form of disjunctive syllogism, and the last one is hypothetical syllogism. Q is true and Q implies R is true, then P implies R is true. So we can express this is in inferential form as P implies Q is the first hypothesis. The second hypothesis, Q implies R. If these two hypotheses are implies R, therefore that is the P implies R. These are our inference rule. All these inference rules can be expressed in inferential form. So we can use these inference rules and laws of logic to check the validity of the arguments. So such examples can be done in the next lecture.